Okay.
Okay, so we want to just.
What did you say to do, Jesse? On the share screen?
Yeah, just keep the PowerPoint and non-presentation mode.
Okay. Just the slideshow right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, go to the slideshow, the white slide, but to the left of that one, Deborah. Yeah, let's try it on that one. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Aha!
Okay.
Yes.
So slideshow is what we need to avoid.
All right, let me see if it's going to advance.
It should.
That's okay. You can advance it for me, right?
Can you advance it?
Yeah, she should be.
Yes. Okay, we'll go back. Oh, man, I showed y'all my joke before I had made it. Okay. So today we're doing these theories and we're going to do these. Did y'all read your scripture for today? Okay. If anybody has the Bible, we can read the scripture again to start with today if somebody has that. And then did anybody get a chance to read the article that I sent y'all?
Yes.
Okay, so the reason that I'm pairing the insurrection with Epiphany Sunday is because the insurrection happened on Epiphany Day in 2021. So when I was looking at which church holidays I want to do, I thought, well, Epiphany Sunday might go good with these two theories because of the figure of King Herod. So I thought, gosh, this might go really well together. And then I thought, oh, wow, I had an epiphany that had happened on Epiphany Day. So I thought we would examine that together. So those three pictures that you see, you've got, that's a picture from the insurrection. And you see what flag is on top of the American flags and the Trump flags. Y'all know what flag that is? That's our Christian flag. Then we've got a picture from the cover of the book that I studied critical masculinity theory and critical whiteness theory in, which is from a sociologist, not a religious scholar. Sociologist, kind of a gender theorist. And so that was a picture from the cover. And then this is Hookie, his artwork. This is called The Magi. We'll go to the next one. Okay, Highway to the Manger Zone. Y'all are singing it in your head now, aren't you? I thought on Critical Masculinity Day, what better meme than to meme Top Gun with Epiphany if we're doing critical masculinity. So today, these are the things that we're studying and we're pairing them. And I did want to make you laugh, and I'm really happy that you did laugh. So let's go to the next one. She make that up. I didn't make it up. It was on the internet. It was great. I was like, couldn't do it. It was perfect though. I might forever sing Highway to the Manger Zone now on every, I don't know. Okay, so we've got, can we move that little small screen that's up there, Deborah? Fantastic.
I didn't know you could take it off.
Yeah, we could go to the left, yeah.
Left because you're not.
It's okay there. It's good right there.
So I want to kind of briefly go over these theories. We're going to touch on these less than we did feminism and womanism and move more towards applying the biblical text to the insurrection. So I want to really move towards that. Okay, so critical masculinity theory is an emerging theory in theoretical studies. So it comes out of gender studies. It comes a lot out of feminism. Sort of the impetus for a lot of the parts of critical masculinity theory that study things that are actually happening in the landscape come from their response, comes from a lot of men's rights groups that are a response to feminism and our response to women. So it's good that we studied feminism last week so we can kind of piggyback off of that. Most of the groups that started that are studied, and I'll get to this on the next slide, men's rights activists and fathers' rights activists and those things that are kind of in the, this is highly sociological because this is the developing theory. So you're studying the behavior of people that are doing things right now. So that's what you're studying. So it is developing because when you look at the power structures, if we're looking at critical theory and we're examining the systems of oppression, power, and domination in society, well, this is going to be the last one because this is the major stronghold. So this is going to be the last one that you're looking at. So these are some of the some of the themes that I encountered in Kimmel's work that I studied, so anger, which was the picture, of course, with the man and the flame around the head, which I just think it's a very interesting cover. The anger, school shootings and mass shootings, this is a big part of this kind of study. Of course, there are plenty of those to study and look at, unfortunately. And of late, I would say that that's an expanding area that gender theorists are kind of revisiting, because of late there have been variations in the pattern to who these shooters are. Misogyny, of course, hatred of women. I put this one in quotes, misandry, which is hatred of men and boys. Now, this is something that men's rights activists are going to say, this is a real thing. This is what happens, is hatred of men and boys. Not all scholars agree that it's actually a thing that is studied, but a lot of people who are pushing masculinity theory on behalf of men and men's rights groups are going to say that misandry is a thing. Many scholars are going to say it's a neologism, so it's not even logical to even say that. So that's why I put it in quotation marks. Often white men as victims, men's rights activism, which is classified as hate groups since 2012 by the SPLC. So if you look on the SPLC's website, Southern Poverty Law Center's website, and you look at the map of hate groups, many of the groups that are on those hate groups are either white supremacist organizations or they are men's rights organizations. Those are the main ones that are on there. So there's a great connection to that to study. Fathers' rights activism, which is very interesting. If you get into that, if you have time to read Michael Kimmel's book, I would say it's eye-opening. It's full of statistics. He does some TED Talks that you can watch if you're interested in learning more about this. It's very interesting. It's also slam-packed with information, so it will take you a while to process everything that he presents to you, but he's got long years in gender theory. So it's very interesting what he presents. Restorative is in parentheses, violence against women, because often this is the violence against women that is studied as part of critical masculinity theory is restorative violence, because it's restoring the power that men feel like they lose, that they try to get back through violence against women, often in domestic violence situations, but also in mass shooting situations, personal shooting situations. You see lots of murder-suicides this happens in. So restorative violence is one of the, and also far-right extremism, including neo-Nazism and Christian nationalism, which I know y'all just studied, right?
Right.
So we're well-versed in that. Let's go to the next one. Working?
It was a month.
I bet because we put it in the other mode, it's not working. There must be some special little thing about it. Okay, so when I
There it is.
Good.
okay, so when there it is, yeah. Okay, this is the slide we start with. So when I studied Michael Kimmel's work, Critical Masculinity, there's a lot of critical whiteness in his work as well. This is the main concept that Michael Kimmel talks about. A lot of his research revolves around this concept called aggrieved entitlement. And I just want to re-up on my trigger warning from last week. I am not critiquing critically anyone's masculinity in this room. I'm not personally critiquing you or your mama, or your daddy or your uncles or your cousins or anybody or your brother-in-law. I'm not doing that. What I am doing is presenting to you some scholarship that has made me look at our patterns in religious studies, theology, and biblical studies in a different way. So this is part of this that really factors into this. Okay, aggrieved entitlement. So I also want to trigger warn you, he talks about politics a lot. Now, you've heard the phrase, the personal is political, and you may agree or disagree with that, but for all intents and purposes of this conversation, I will say that that is something that you may need to hold into your mind and think as a litmus test. Okay, let's think about these concepts and really compare it, because I used to think that phrase wasn't a thing. I was like, that's not true. People don't take their personal stuff into politics. I was so young and idealistic, but really what I find is that they do. So, and it's kind of hard to say, because I think it's very offensive to people who realize that maybe they're doing that. And maybe they realize that they're doing it and they think, I was doing this for this reason. And I think that everybody has their reasons to do things, but in the form of critical whiteness and critical masculinity theory, I think the things that were done, the personal is political, taking your personal into the political sphere, I think becomes a huge system of oppression and domination. And it's something that we see happening a lot now. And I will say, I did this presentation 2 years, almost a year and a half ago, and a lot has happened since then. And it's happening now with all of the charges that are coming up against Trump. I know you see his name and you see his picture up there, but this is all connected. And Michael Kimmel makes a connection to this. He published this book originally in 2013, and then he updated the preface in 2017. And by the way, my professor didn't want me to present this book. Like, she wanted someone to present it, but then she was like, I don't know if you should present this. Because she was like, I don't know how people will take it. And I was like, well, this is really important. So I think we should present this. And I will say that I exposed to some people who would maybe fall into this idea. So Trump's election underscores the argument of the book that white men's anger comes from the potent fusion of two sentiments: entitlement and a sense of victimization. The righteous indignation, the anti-Washington populism, there's a term, sociological term, populism, is fueled by what I came to call aggrieved entitlement. That sense that those benefits to which you believed yourself entitled have been snatched away from you by unseen forces larger and more powerful. You feel yourself to be the heir to a great promise, the American dream, which has turned into an impossible fantasy for the very people who were supposed to inherit it. So this is from the updated preface. And of course, this is a year after Trump's election. So when everybody was kind of recalibrating, I think everything is, I would say that our whole American landscape is completely different after 2016. And I'm not saying different good, different bad. I'm just saying different. So let's go to the next one. Okay, so critical whiteness, we're going to go ahead and move on. The area of study emerging, especially in biblical studies, which examines and seeks to decenter the influence of white European heteropatriarchal values on Western religion, Western society, theology, and religion, because those are all kind of wrapped up together. So, and this is an intersectional theory. We're going to study intersectionality on the last day, but this intersects a lot of different areas. And this is because the people who are developing these theories are mainly queer, female, and persons of color scholars. So they are living the intersecting systems of oppression, and they bring that to their studies through their own social location, which is their experience. So a lot of this is going to overlap into that. And it's an emerging area too. So I kind of defined it for you, but you can read critically about whiteness theory, but it's going to be in reference to a lot of particular in queer studies, and you're going to read it in feminist studies, and you're going to read it in womanist studies applied to this biblical text or this idea or this or this or this. So it's kind of emerging, but it blends all of these ideas. Yes. Oh, yeah.
You have European emphasized in there.
Yeah.
What's the sense about Latin American, South American, where the patriarchal male stuff is so dominant?
Right.
In the same way as.
Well, I would think about the doctrine of discovery came from the Pope when Spain came to the New World. Spain and Portugal came to the New World, and so they were European. Even though we maybe don't think about Spain and Portugal being European, they were given permission by the Pope. So if they discovered something in the New World, it became property of the Pope or property of Christendom. And so what they discovered in the New World were new places, but filled with people. What kind of people? Indigenous people. And what did they do to those people? They enslaved those people. And the encomienda system was some of the most brutal slavery system in the world. Only about 10% of the population was left after the Spanish settlers, and this is, the conquistadors and all these people came after this initial doctrine of discovery, but that's tied to religion. And so religion used power to enslave and dominate and oppress other people, which decimated the cultures there and changed them. A lot of those cultures were matrilineal, and they're not anymore because they were changed. Their entire culture was changed when they were oppressed and dominated and kind of wiped out. So it was, and you can read the Incommunion system. I can give you some reading on that. It's very interesting. But I would say go back to the doctrine of discovery and just, you can Google that and it'll tell you all about how, like, the timing of all these things and how that happened. Because you're right, in a lot of Latin American countries, and I do say European, but that's because the whole world was kind of dominated by European interests at the time when the New World was spreading out. This all history factors into all of this. And I'm not a history student. So I just want you to hear me say, if I get dates wrong, y'all forgive me because I'm not a history student. So if you go back and look at this, there's just a lot of those European values came to the New World, and especially America, which became a superpower. But it's in colonization. We're going to get to that next week. But of course, European countries went out into the rest of the world and colonized it. So there's all of those values were impressed oppressively upon the rest of the world. But that's been going on for a long time because, Greece, Rome, all of these imperial systems did the same thing, and European people kind of took that pattern and ran with it, and it went into the rest of the world. So these are two readings that I would recommend to you. Ethnicity and Inclusion. This is actually an English scholar by David Horrell. This is a heavy book, but if you want to read more about how he thinks about the identities of Jesus and how our identities factor into the way that we read scripture. It's a great book. He's got some shorter articles I could send you. But he is one of the main people that I read, and I started to think critically about I should decenter myself. And I never had thought about the fact that I was centered. Because I always heard my friends saying, well, I'm African American, or I'm this American, or I'm Black, and I always thought, or scholars, of course, when they would say I'm Black feminist, I thought, that's why do they say they're a Black feminist? Why are they particularizing themselves? And I think some of that comes out of wanting to have their own identity away from the centered whiteness. But when you think about it, when you say someone, and this is also with men, because you hear athletes, and you think male athletes, and you think, just think about what the World Cup, it's always the Women's World Cup. And I'm like, okay, but that's because maleness is centered. Or when you're thinking about feminists, Black feminists, well, whiteness is centered. And so when you think about biblical studies, inherently, those are white European, heteropatriarchal biblical studies that are just now starting to open up to the rest of the world, like all things. It wasn't so long ago that women in this country weren't centered in things, and it was always men who were centered, and women were decentered. So, and I think you can go even back to the biblical text with this. When you think about the language of our biblical text, when you center the maleness of God, and when those pronouns are centered because God is grammatically male in your biblical text, which is a patriarchal text, and it's translated from a patriarchal language system in a patriarchal culture, you center that male identity. And in centering the male identity, you decenter the female identity. It becomes outside and other. And yes, I'm bringing in feminist theology and feminist studies here, but that's some of what critical whiteness is getting to, because they're working to, in the same way, decenter that whiteness. And I think critical masculinity is working towards that too, to decenter the automatic default male. It's like when they say, and all men are created equal in the Constitution, which we know is a fallacy for a lot of reasons when that was written, but all men is supposed to encompass women too, except for it didn't, and it definitely didn't encompass anybody of color. So the idea that these terms, these blanket terms that are particularized, cover everyone is really starting to be challenged through critical whiteness, especially in critical masculinity theories. Now, this is not attacking people. This is attacking these identities. So this identity of masculinity, your masculinity or your femininity is a part of you. This is a part of your identity. This is a piece of you that you develop. Sometimes, though, the way it develops, if it develops and it's exercised and it's played out in an oppressive way, you have to understand that that masculinity can negate somebody else's sense of masculinity, or even someone else's sense of their own femininity, or their otherness, or however people see their identity. So this is just one way. This other book I put up here because this is a participant's guide. Benjamin Boswell is a preacher in Myers Park Baptist Church. And I put this up here because I've heard him speak several times. He spoke through our diversity and inclusion committee, which I'm on. He does some presentations for McAfee. And our youth associate, Zach Mason, who's going to be starting in a week, next week. This will be their first day to be introduced. He is actually interning with Ben Boswell at his church, and he is studying all about this confronting whiteness. Ben Boswell has done a lot of work in whiteness theory, and he has developed this guide for churches and for people, for mostly white kind of middle class, upper class people to kind of understand the idea of whiteness and how that's filtered through history and religion and all those kind of things. And he's made it into there's a book, and then there's a participant's guide, and you can get trained to be a presenter on it, and you can do it at your church. Very cool. I haven't been able to take the course yet, but it's on my list for she'll wait so I can take it, and hopefully I'll be able to take it with Zach. I want to update on whether he can be a presenter on that. So I would commend that to you, and this will be sent to you so you can go and look at it. We go to the next one. Okay, so on the standard calendar, the day of Epiphany is always January 6th, marks the end of the 12 days of Christmas. On the liturgical / church calendar, Epiphany Sunday is traditionally celebrated on the Sunday following the day of Epiphany. So whatever the day of Epiphany is, we're going to celebrate it the Sunday after. Every so often, we get to celebrate it on the day, which is happening this year. So we get to talk about the Magi on Epiphany Day this year, which is fun. That's one of my favorite children's sermons. So it's always fun. I have chocolate gold coins. Don't tell the kids. But, it's normally celebrated with concentration on the three Magi, or the three kings, and their journey to gift the Messiah of whom they dreamed and who was revealed to them by Star of Bethlehem. Light, gold, frankincense, myrrh. Popular liturgical symbols to celebrate the day. In Catholic and Episcopalian traditions, you've got Three Kings Day, or the Feast of Epiphany. Some really cool bread that's made, traditional bread that's made, especially in Latin and Latino cultures. Really cool stuff. And then in this context, the day of Epiphany marks the beginning of Epiphany season, which ends on the first day of Lent, Ash Wednesday. And most mainline denominations, like in our church, I think this period, we would call it the first season of ordinary time. So this is the little bit of green that comes at the beginning of the year. And then, of course, now we're in the giant season of green at the end of the year, the giant season of ordinary times. So, to the next one. All right. So if you read through your biblical text, you noticed that King Herod was in there. And you may have read that and thought, I've heard of this Herod before. But the thing is that there's several Herods that are in the Bible. And so this is a great flow chart from Warren Carter's The Essential Guide to the Roman Empire in the New Testament. I think that's what it's called. It's on my source thing. I would highly recommend that book to you. I read it in New Testament, and it's short. It's only like 100 pages because Dr. Parker's great. And she gives you stuff like that to start with. And then you get into her class and she's like, read a whole 300-page book in a week. No, I'm joking. She doesn't say it like that. She did tell us one time we need to read more books. She wasn't wrong, though. Okay, so Herod is the Roman appointed puppet or client king that's in this Matthew 2 text. And as the New Testament proceeds, you're going to see all these names mentioned. And the thing that you need to know about them is that they're appointed by Rome. They serve at the pleasure of Rome. Yes, they were Jewish. However, they weren't the same as the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they weren't the same as the people who are in Matthew's house church and Luke's house church. They're not exactly the same. They're going to be kind of upper class elites in your Greek society. And so they were appointed and they serve at the pleasure of Rome. So if you think about, they're kind of like this upper middle management position, and they keep the Jewish people in line because that's what Rome wants them to do, so that there won't be any uprising, so that it won't threaten their power. So this is something that you have to understand about who Herod is. It's not just that he is a king, the king of the Jews, and so he's mad at Jesus because Jesus was trying to be the king of the Jews, and they had this little interpersonal thing. That's not exactly it. It's more of a power issue because they were appointed to be these kings, and they ruled over the temples and the Jewish people in Rome. We'll go to the next one. Thanks. Okay, so Herod the Great appears in Matthew 2. He is the king who opposes God's purposes by trying to kill the newborn Jesus, who has been commissioned to manifest God's saving purposes. The Magi's announcement of a newborn king of the Jews threatens Herod, since he is Rome's appointed king of the Jews. Matthew 2 reveals Herod's various attempts to defend his power, cataloging his elite strategies of allies, spies, lies, and murder to maintain oppressive structures. So in 2:4-6, he uses alliances to gain information from the local Jerusalem leaders. In 2:7-8a, he exerts his power to recruit the Magi as spies or secret agents, sending them to gain intelligence about Jesus's birthplace. He engages in spin, deceiving the Magi by lying about his motives, 2:8, and he employs violence after learning that the Magi deceived him. He orders the soldiers, of course, to kill the innocent and defenseless male infants in the region of Bethlehem so as to remove any threat. And if you read through chapters 1 and 2, you read back through that story, which that's in the lectionary a lot. And it's, I mean, when you think about it, like that is so, every time you get to that, it's scary. And it's, it always hits me hard when I read through that story, because it's like, oh, somebody killed the babies, but wow, killed the babies to keep you in power because you were threatened. I mean, it's just, you know, it's hard to think about. If you've ever held a baby, think about it. Mm-hmm. Rome ruled through alliances with provincial elites. One form of the alliances involved client kings whom Rome established to rule certain territory in return for loyalty to Rome. New Testament texts refer to several client kings from the Herodian dynasty. That's what we call the little flowcharts of the Herods, the Herodian dynasty. They all come from Herod, who ruled Judea and Galilee. Sorry, I didn't capitalize Galilee. As those who enforced and benefited from the unjust and oppressive societal order, these kings often appear in the New Testament text as murderously resistant to God's purposes manifested in Jesus and through his followers like the disciples and Paul. Followers are warned of the lengths to which kings, including emperors, will go to protect their privileges against challengers. And so those are some scriptural citations where you can look and see that. We'll go to the next one. All right, so Robert P. Jones, he's the author of the article that I sent out to you guys, if you've ever heard of him. He's from Mississippi. This is one of his most recent books that I would highly commend to you reading. If you haven't read this, this is a great read. What's striking about this read that I knew but I didn't know, when I read through this, it details a lynch mob, and that lynch mob took place in Noonan, Georgia, and he details the view that you could have had from the steps of Central Baptist Church, which is where I was previously serving in ministry. So when I read through this book, it was chilling. Huh? He is
No.
he's from Mississippi, I think. Yeah.
He studied at Emory.
Yeah, he studied, yeah. And I can't remember what his connection to the Noonan one was and why I'd have to read back through why he put that in there. But I was struck when I read through this, because everyone said, you need to read through this book. And I was like, whoa, it was really, really hits home because you read about it. Of course, you heard about Jason Aldean's song recently, Try That in a Small Town. And then he's on the courthouse of the steps. And people are like, there was a lynch mob here. There's a lynch mob at almost every courthouse that was back at that time. You can read through so many records. And the lynch mobs almost always followed the same story, that a black man attacked a white woman. And so the lynch mob comes not because the person has been put on trial and they're going to go to prison, or and they receive justice through the state. The lynch mob comes as a form of restorative violence to restore their power. So you can read through lots of accounts of that. And when I did critical whiteness theory and critical masculinity theory in this class, those are actually my two theories that I studied. And I studied them in conjunction with some critical race theory, of course, and the Dinah scripture story from Genesis 34. So if you remember Genesis 34, and you may not if you've only been reading the lectionary because it's not in the lectionary. And fun fact, it's left out of a lot of Genesis commentaries because commentators don't even want to touch it. They don't even want to talk about it. So I studied that as applied to stories of restorative violence, like the lynch mob that's detailed in this book. So it's a very interesting conflation of things, which brings me to the next slide. Yay, conflation. So here's our word of the day. Just like Sesame Street, but heavier. I need Oscar the Grouch out here. The merging of two or more sets of information, text, ideas, etc., into one. So the forceful conflation of two traditions is your example from Oxford Languages. If you've never heard this term, I want you to think about this term and how things can be mishmashed together. So I'm going to talk about Epiphany Sunday and the insurrection and critical whiteness theory and critical masculinity theory all together as a conflation. And I touched on this some in my blog about ironclad intersecting systems of domination and oppression. Talk a little bit about that in modern times. And so we're going to talk about this through these sources. So let's go to the next one. All right, so we saw what a conflation means. Let's look at some pictures of a conflation. This is illustrated very well through these photographs. These are not portraits. This is not an artist's rendition. These are photographs from the day of the insurrection. So tell me some of the things you see in the photographs.
Bible. The rebel.
We see a Bible right there.
The rebel flag.
The rebel flag, which is stars and bars.
How about that?
There's the noose. And of course, whose name's on the other flags? Trump. Let's go to the next one. All right, so here's that picture that I showed you in the first one, and this is in front of the African American History Museum. There's the stars and bars there at the Capitol. I read one article, and maybe it was in Robert Jones' article, maybe it was in another one too, I can't remember. I've had a few things I'm preparing for today. My mind is a conflation. Ideas. But it talked about how, on the day of the insurrectionists did something that the Confederacy never did, which was fly that flag in the nation's capital. I mean, to think about that is, when you put that in perspective, that's crazy to me. It's crazy. I remember the day this happened, I got so scared because I was watching on the C-SPAN, they were doing the votes and counting the votes. And I remember going to pick up Aaron. I was in the car rider for Aaron. And I remember I was stopped. So I pulled it up on C-SPAN and I was watching. And I remember I was texting with Norm because he said, "Oh, are you watching it? Anything spicy happening?" And I was like, "Oh, no, not, just running the mill, whatever." And I remember all of a sudden there was no one on the screen. And I said, "Oh, what are they doing?" And I texted him, I said, "Hey, is my video behind? Can you pull this up?" They have all these screens at his work. So he was like, "Oh no, we're all watching it. They're gone." And he was like, "Why are they gone?" And then of course, everybody knows what happened after that, but it scared me to death. I remember going home and packing a go bag. I got so worried. I may have read too much Handmaid's Tale, but I got so worried that I needed to get out of here. I got my life straws and my socks. I was ready to get on. And so I just want you to look at the Betsy Ross flag too, because I don't know if you've noticed that people are flying this more often. You may not live in a place where people fly this more often, but I can tell you on my way home to and from, I can count at least 3 of these flying at people's houses.
Wow.
And to me, it's a signal. It signals what kind of people are flying that flag, because why would you fly the Betsy Ross flag? That's not our flag anymore. That's not the flag of the United States. But as I researched it, because I noticed more and more of these flags were flying near me. Now, Don't Tread on Me has been around for a while from the Tea Party. We know where all that's coming from. So I know where that flag is. But this Betsy Ross flag, this is a good description. It's been co-opted by white supremacist groups to idealize a time when women and people of color had no power. And so that's a conflation of critical masculinity and critical whiteness that functions, that gets legs through the way that sometimes we tend to interpret the biblical text by placing ourselves as people of white European descent as the main characters. How often have you read through something in the Bible and thought, oh, I'm in the place of these people, which is not bad. We all kind of imagine ourselves as the biblical character, but the breakdown comes down when we actually picture a white person as these people, and a white person centered in Roman culture, which would not have been, that's not historically accurate. The Bible is, of course, not a history book, but you have to think when you're reading the scriptures and you're placing yourself in the center of them, no one was white. No one. There were people of Eastern European, descent, that would have been in, what word am I saying? I'm trying to think.
Middle Eastern.
Yeah, Middle Eastern. I'm sorry. Thank you for that. In my mind, Middle Eastern descent, they would have been there. You would have had people from Africa. The Ethiopian eunuch is Black. You have to think when you're reading through, more than likely the Ethiopian eunuch is probably of African descent. Some of the church fathers, when you're reading Tertullian, he is African. He is from Alexandria. He is probably of African descent. So when you think through, these things kind of matter. And I'm foreshadowing our study next week, of course, with critical race theory, because a lot of these groups, these far-right groups, these men's rights groups, these white supremacist groups have co-opted the biblical text and the Christian tradition and have changed it into something that it's not. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so I just wanted to circle back to this and think about it in the context of Epiphany. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so I'm leaving it on this image. Does anybody know what gaiter the person's wearing?
No.
What colors that's affiliated with?
Black.
Affiliated with the Proud Boys. Those are the Proud Boys colors.
Oh.
So you've got a man sporting Proud Boys gear, holding the Christian flag in front of the American flag. And this looks like the Capitol. This looks like the steps leading to the Capitol. I don't know that. It didn't say in the Getty Images description, but that's what it looks like. So here's a conflation in one picture. And so when we think about the biblical text that we examine today, Herod and the Magi and Jesus being born and Herod's response to that, and even the Magi's response to Herod after experiencing contact with angels and their dreams. And so God via the angels. When we think about all that and we think about how things played out in our biblical text with this flexing of authority and violent consequences that happen to hang on to power. And of course, we know what happens at the end of Jesus's life with consequences of power, which we're going to get to next week. There's a lot. I feel like there's a lot for us to think about. And the fact that the insurrection happened on Epiphany, I just can't shake. I just feel like maybe we're not paying enough attention to that. Epiphany is the day when the Magi proclaim, here is the Messiah born to earth. Here's Jesus. It is a great day. This is Emmanuel. This is God with us here on the earth. The Magi proclaim this. And this happens on January 6th. And I just can't shake the fact that I feel like God may have been trying to tell us something on that Epiphany day with these powers and the way that they tried to hang on to their power and what violence it caused. I mean, we're just now learning everything about January 6th. I mean, how many of the hearings did we all watch on TV? How many interviews, how many depositions, how many arrests have happened, how many prosecutions have happened? And of course, we're transitioning towards all of that. So there are some consequences, but I mean, it's just when you think about how long ago the Herodian dynasty was and Jesus was born. And then you think about this is 2 years ago. This is almost 2 years ago. That's significant, I feel. And I feel maybe it's something that we need to look at. If Jesus is the light to the world, well, I don't know. I felt kind of dark on this day. I don't know how about y'all, but you're every say, go bag. I said, how much cash we got at home, Norm? These are the sources that I use today for further reading. Of course, I'm going to send this out at the end, but if you want to read any of these this week or look them up, snap a picture of the slide. The Warren Carter book is the one that I was saying. It's nice and short. Roman Empire, New Testament, essential guide. Really, really good to understanding the context of the New Testament. Let's go to the next one. Okay, topic 3, this is going to be next week. So take a picture of this. I just want you to try to read all of chapter 19. But if you can, I want you to try and read Luke's passion narrative all the way through the resurrection. So that starts about midway through chapter 18 and it goes through Luke 24. It's not too much, and it's pretty good so that you get a whole idea of where Luke's going. Of course, if you want to read all 31 chapters of Luke, I say go for it. If you got the time, try and read through it because you really do forget a lot of what's happening in these narratives. And they're narratives, they're stories. They start here and they go here because they're written after Jesus was dead. These people went back and wrote down what they remembered. So that's what you get in the biblical text. And so it can be kind of eye-opening when you read through and you're like, oh, story like this. Why'd Matthew present it like this? Why'd Mark immediately present it like this? No, Mark just wants immediately. So this is what we'll be doing next week. So let's go to the next slide, Deborah, and then we'll invite discussion from everybody. So how has our study today using critical masculinity and critical whiteness while reading Matthew's context and account of Epiphany impacted your analysis of this biblical text? Does it move you towards the action of transforming our ecclesial traditions or creating a new and emboldened witness in creation? And I do want y'all to notice that the word that I use for the 3 wise men is magi. Because this has inspired, these things have inspired me to think critically about decentering some things that have always been centered. And of course, I work with children. So when we do Magi Sunday or Epiphany Sunday, all the girls go, well, I want to dress up as one of the kings. And you have little boys that go, no, you can't. You're not a king. And so, and it's like, so originally I started saying, well, Magi. So y'all just dress up how you want, so I could get more kids in the costumes and have less fights. But as I started thinking more about it, I started thinking, oh, okay, well, maybe using that term will decenter some of the maleness of these characters so that we can hear more of the story. Oh, yeah. All right. So anyone have discussion, questions, comments, concerns? Y'all got concerns today? Figured we'd end on that. I'm joking a little. A little.
Let me ask a quick, just to confirm.
Yes.
This bothered me at the beginning, but I think I've got the hang of it now.
Okay.
You're conflating these liturgical cycles with you and current emphases.
That's correct.
Purely arbitrary and purely in your mind.
That's correct. This is my way of disseminating the information about critical theory and Bible with this class in a way that I thought it would be accessible for us to think about, us as real churchy people.
No, this is not just for this question.
No.
This is your whole approach.
Well, yeah, sort of.
I tried to make a logical connection between Magnificat and blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
here, I don't make any logical, because You're in the middle of it. Not that
Yeah.
you're illogical, but it's very personal.
I think when I read through these biblical texts and after studying these critical theories, I start to pair them with the world around me, my experiences around me. And when I'm studying and when I'm reading, there are ideas that come into my mind. And I don't think they're all me because I don't understand half of them. So I sure didn't understand where we were going with the Magnificat and feminism and reproductive justice. I sure didn't understand that. So all I can say is that must be the Holy Spirit. I don't know. I can't tell you for a fact. Holy Spirit didn't come in my ear and say, hello, I'm the Holy Spirit. But can't say I'm not intentionally pairing these ideas together. It's just that when I start to study, I'm like, oh, well, that makes me think about.
But you realize when you say Holy Spirit, you say, this is authoritative. This is not just under.
Well, no,
I think it'd be better to say it's me.
I think that all of us, any authoritative source that we treat as authoritative is somebody who has claimed the power and the authority of the Holy Spirit with the things that they're presenting. I do think there's a huge conflation with that through classical biblical scholarship, which is all male. So I think there's Beth has something.
I just wanted to see if you would agree with this because you have a son. But as I was raising my son, I didn't have the language of critical masculinity or even toxic masculinity. But I remember thinking how much I wanted him to be able to be free of some of the cultural definitions of what it means to be a boy and a man.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to fit. So
Yeah.
if he wanted to play with girls' toys, or he wanted to wear pink, those are obvious things. Or if he just didn't choose to be defining himself in a certain way, it was really hard.
It is, yeah.
To free myself of some of those things. So critical masculinity theory or toxic masculinity, I think is good news for boys and men, not just for feminists.
Definitely.
And it occurred to me along the way that Jesus is such a good model. Jesus,
Yeah.
it got people angry because he did not fit the norm of how his culture defined what it meant to be a heroic man in that time. He said, turn the other cheek.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he befriended women.
Oh, yeah.
Women. And he chose relational power over. So anyway, I just wanted to share that as a mother, I thought about this a lot. What a limiting structure that is for men to put in this box. This is what it means to be a good man.
Yeah, and it's so limited. I would echo that because I've dealt a lot with Aaron on these things. Of course, we live with the kids go to Carrollton, and I'm going to use a term from Michael Kimmel, which is jockocracy. And I love my children's school system, but also hear me say that, let's hear it for the boys on Friday night out there with the football. It is big. It's a big time. And there's lots of school systems like that. But I think that sometimes if you're not that typical man who's out on the football field, and Aaron played football, he didn't like it. He said, I'm tired of getting hit. He said, I don't like this. He said, I don't like it. And I said, yeah, do something else. So
I was running.
yeah, swimming. Yeah. So I think it is freeing for men and women. And I know I talk very directly to both of my children about masculinity issues and femininity issues, and Norm chimes in too, which makes a huge difference. It's not just me saying it, it's not just him saying it, it's both of us saying it. And I will say that Aaron is 13 in November. And when we go to churches where he only hears Father and he in association with God, and he sees stained glass windows where Jesus is lily white, Aaron has leaned over to me and said, I don't like the windows. and he says, why are they only saying he, Mom? They're only saying he. And he'll go, aren't you tired of that? I'll say, yeah. I'm extremely proud, but also if I wouldn't have talked to him, and if Dad wouldn't have talked to him, and if we wouldn't have had open discussions about different ways of thinking, then Aaron wouldn't be saying those things. So it all starts somewhere. Oh, you had a question before you leave?
My daughter, when she was 4, we were in a church that would be known, but Divinity Baptist Church. I'm sorry, I don't remember what the preacher said. But she looked up at me and she said, "You don't believe that, do you, Dad?"
Oh.
She went back earlier.
Oh, did they listen, don't they?
Dude, that's what I wanted us.
Yeah. Yes, Davida.
I wanted to hear you, riff on the Barbie movie.
Oh my gosh, y'all. My job is just beach with Ken. I almost put that up instead of Highway to the Manger Zone, but I couldn't not go for Highway to the Manger Zone because I was singing it. I like that movie too, by the way. So the Barbie movie is fantastic. If you haven't seen the Barbie movie, I would highly recommend for you to go see it. All of these critical theories that we have studied so far are in the Barbie movie. They are in there in a hilarious way. And I will tell you that it has a great message for men. You may have heard that Barbie is attacking men. You may have heard that Barbie is attacking masculinity. This is all, you may have heard people talking. I think Ben Shapiro is one of the people who are really going after the Barbie movie. But it's really great. When Ken talks about, there's a part in the movie where he goes to the real world and he sees that it's reversed. And instead of Barbies and women being centered and being in all of the, positions that they serve in Barbie land, he goes to the real world and he sees that it's men, it's all men. Men are in the center of things. And so he goes to the school library where Barbie is looking for the girl who's playing with her because she's got this weird connection. She's got to sort it out because she's got flat feet now and she's getting connected. And it's really cool. But he goes into the library and he gets books about patriarchy. And so he learns about patriarchy and and then he sees cops on horses. And so then he thinks patriarchy is about horses and men being in control. And it's just hilarious. Then he goes back to Barbie land and he changes it and he applies the patriarchy. It's so hilarious. But there's that one part where Ken goes to the real world and in Barbie land, you see him say, my job is just beach. It's actually just beach because he's Beach Ken. Beach Ken, like that. They all have names like this is this Barbie or this Barbie. He's Beach Ken. And so he said, my life is just beach. My whole job is beach. And there's a hilarious part about that. But he goes to the real world. So he goes out where the lifeguards are. He says, hey, can I get a job? I do beach. And he's like, well, do you know how to save anyone? And he's like, well, no, I do beach. And then he walks into a hospital because he's holding his books on patriarchy. And here's a doctor, a female doctor. And he goes up to her and he says, yes, I'd like to perform an appendectomy. And she says, I can't allow you to perform an appendectomy. You're not a doctor. And he goes, yes, but I'm a man. Yes, that doesn't qualify you to perform an appendectomy. And he goes, speak to a man. Yes, can I speak to a doctor? She goes, you're speaking to a doctor. Yes, but I'd like to speak to a man. And so then he sees a male doctor walk right. He goes, I'm talking to, and it's very hilarious. And I'll tell you that Norm went to see it with me and he super enjoyed it. Ken's main character, even though Barbie is centered, it's called the Barbie movie. You would have to watch Ken's interactions. Great. And I'll tell you, after the movie, Norm liked it so much. He said, I want to get a shirt for the Barbie movie. And so Norm he got the shirt that says, I'm Kenneth. And I have weird Barbie, stay weird. It says stay weird. I got a weird Barbie shirt because I liked her role in the film. And I thought Kate McKinnon was hilarious. So
And then at the end, when he decides
oh yeah.
he goes, I didn't like horses anyway.
I was really down with the patriarchy once I learned it wasn't about horses. So.
Anybody else?
Yeah, any questions, comments? No, okay. All right. Anything else, y'all?
Thank you.
Okay, thank y'all for being here. I appreciate it. I'll send y'all some reading this week for critical race theory. What everyone